right? In northern Minnesota, they said aspen was junk. They couldn't do anything with it, and then all of a sudden they discovered they really could, and now they want aspen. Now that red maple is taking over and displacing the aspen, they're trying to reverse that, but when the red maple takes over, they can learn to make paper out of red maple too, you know, so.
Walnut. Yeah, you didn't mention the walnut. What about that?
Yeah, I think walnut will be pretty good. Even in a warm climate, there's walnut in Kansas. But walnut requires a deep silty soil, and they have a lot of deep silty soil in Kansas. So again, your floodplains just above the floods, but where you have a deep silty, fairly flat site, that's where walnut's going to do the best. And you have to find a market for walnut. I mean, it's a specialty market. Actually, dark-colored woods are back in fashion now. But whether those dark-colored woods will be in fashion 50 years from now when your walnut tree is mature, I can't tell you. So, you know, people like light-colored woods for a decade, and then they get tired of that, and then they want dark woods, and then they want light woods again. So it's a fashion thing. People had to have maple for the 90s, and now in the 2000s, people are going back to walnut. So, yeah.
The earthworm thing, night crawlers and earthworm, they're two different whole species, aren't they?
Nightcrawler is a type of earthworm.
But they look so different in the little ones.
Oh, there are a lot of species.
Oh, okay, but
right.
They're all European.
They're all European, yeah.
Okay.
There are a lot of different species. There's Dendrobana, which is only an inch long. The angleworms, which are the ones with the pink on one end, and the rest is kind of gray, and they're thin, long and thin. You see them on the sidewalk. I saw the first ones this week. Those are Aparectidea rosea or Aparectidea tuberculata, which is 11 syllables. It's a mouthful to say. And then there's Lumbricus rubellus, which is just like a nightcrawler but half the size, and it's called the leafworm. Yeah, there are a lot of different species of earthworms here.
The earthworms are the magic for gardening, aren't they?
Well, but most people are growing European plants in their garden. European plants co-evolved with European earthworms, and so they're adapted to get along with each other, whereas our plants are not. Yeah. So if you're growing native wildflowers or native species, they're not going to do as well with earthworms, whereas if you're growing European perennials and European vegetables, they're adapted to earthworms, right?
Wow.
Right, and in cornfields, they actually try to get more night crawlers, but because they drill the holes and the more water infiltrates, but cornfields are a very poor environment for night crawlers. You know, they rake off all the leaf litter, which is what they eat. They put herbicides and fungicides and insecticides on, which kills the worms. They disc it and they cut the worms in half. And they may have told you when you were a kid you could cut a worm in half and each half would live. It's not true. And because the leaf litter is taken away in the fall, it freezes deeper. It kills the worms. So they always want more earthworms in cornfields, but the practice, the way we grow corn, does everything you could think of to be negative against earthworms. And so it doesn't surprise me that you don't find many night crawlers in cornfields. You do find the angleworms, Aparectidea, in cornfields. They're a little tougher. But there's a lot of people who've spent their whole career trying to figure out how to get more earthworms in cornfields. And they don't want to live there. They want to live in the woods. And unfortunately, they're not native in our woods. So, yeah.
This strays a little bit from your subject matter, but I saw something somewhere and I didn't follow up on it. But there was a couple of writers, I think in Minnesota, Wisconsin, just did a book that prairie grass type ecosystem will actually store more carbon than a woodland. Can you comment on that?
Well, not necessarily more, but if you have a good deep soil and you establish native prairie, yeah, you can sequester as much carbon as you would in a growing woodland. But not all prairies. If it's sandy soil or shallow soil, that's not true. But if you have a deep, loamy or silty soil and you put native prairie grass on it, you can, by 50 years from now, you could probably sequester 100 tons of carbon per acre. So if you want to eliminate your personal carbon footprint, if you do 10 acres of that, it'd probably sequester all the carbon you emit in your entire life from driving your car and heating your house and all that. But you could sequester an equal amount by planting it to an oak forest by the time the oak trees are all 2 feet in diameter, because all that wood is 50% carbon. In the grassland, the difference is it's all stored in the soil. Right? Grasses have roots that go, native grasses, their roots go very deep. They have lots of fine roots that die and regrow, and all the ones that die, that's carbon down in the soil. And yeah, that's why ethanol from native grasses could be one of our big solutions to global warming. Because you harvest the grass in the fall and the top part's already died, the plant's already sacrificed it, and you turn that into ethanol, it's 7 times as efficient as turning corn into ethanol in terms of the energy it takes to make it into ethanol. And at the same time, you're sequestering a lot of carbon in the soil. And if you burn that ethanol in a car, you could end up with less CO2 in the atmosphere than before you drove the car, because so much CO2 is going into the soil. But that could be a big future for western Minnesota. You know, growing biofuels with native grasses, and then it's wildlife habitat the rest of the year. And you're getting a crop and you're getting ethanol, and it's wildlife habitat too. You know, corn does not sequester carbon in the soil. Corn takes carbon out of the soil. So, yeah.
How does climate change go for fruit trees?
The question is about fruit trees. Well, some fruit trees like cherries will do better in Minnesota in a warmer climate. You know, we've had trouble with cherry trees, trouble with it being too cold here. So cherries might do better. Apples will probably move into northern Minnesota. Might be too dry in southern Minnesota. But again, if you have an area of deep silty soil, they'll still do okay. I'm not sure it'll get warm enough to grow peaches here. Maybe in southeastern Minnesota. You know, in Michigan they grow peaches.
Not Kansas.
Not Kansas, no. But again, if you had a deep silty soil, you probably could grow peaches in Kansas.
How about if you had like an overstory of some light leaf tree, and then could you potentially grow fruit trees as an understory tree?
Yeah, for a lot of fruit trees need sun, but there might be some species that don't need full sun. You know, cherries, for example, they won't have the flavor unless they're out in the full sun, because it's the sun hitting the anthocyanins in the cherry that makes the sugar, just like the red leaves in the fall. So there might be some crops, though, that you could grow in the understory of a forest in the future.
You keep emphasizing this deep, silty soil.
Yeah.
Okay? How do people get deep, silty?
Well, if you don't have it, you're not going to get it. Well, you could, but you could bring in soil. You could bring in soil. It's incredibly expensive.
But I mean, you said we have it here.
You have it on the floodplains. And in some cases, it's present on the slopes, too, depending on the exact history of a given area. But it's not as deep on the slopes as it is on the floodplains. You know, and a deep, silty soil holds a lot of water, and having that water goes a long way towards mitigating a warmer climate. You know, you can grow a sugar maple tree in Kansas City if you sprinkle it 2 or 3 times during the summer. You know, it's not the heat, it's the fact that the tree dries out. And trees are much less likely to dry out on a deep, silty soil than any other soil type. And so if you have a deep, silty soil, you're going to be able to grow things in a warmer climate that you can't grow anywhere else. Yeah.
Here's a very practical question. You're a tree guy.
Yeah.
Here in Lanesboro, we have a brush dump. All year, anytime trees come down for any reason, or brush gets created, it goes to our brush dump, which is right next to the river by the ball field. Then once or twice a year, usually about a week before a community event, it's set on fire. And then it smolders for the next couple of weeks, usually through the community event. And you know, everybody here kind of knows the story.
Yeah.
It's very annoying to many people, and there are other people who, they don't care.
Yeah.
It's like, hey, we've been doing this forever.
Right.
What are you going to do? You know, we don't have any other place to do it. So my question is this. I'm not asking you to weigh in on the controversy, but there's obviously a whole lot of plant material here, there's carbon and everything else, and considering what you're talking to us about, and without figuring out all the exact expenses, but if all this wood and brush, if it was chipped up, and how might it better be disposed of
Right. Well,
than burning it?